Welcome back to another episode of the Social Media Millionaire Podcast. I'm Kenda, in case you didn't know. It's my face on the cover. And I have a very special guest with us today. Welcome to the podcast.
Why, thank you. I'm Nancy Laney. I might be related to Kenda.
She might be. There might be some relation there. We don't know.
We seem to have the same last name.
We'll find out in the intro. So, as I do with all of my guests, we're going to ask the hard questions. We're going to really drill down, force you to be honest.
Bring it on.
I'm kidding.
Bring it on. I'm ready.
No, but what I usually do is I'm like, so do you want to tell people like how we met?
Well, I think we met on the phone.
We met on FaceTime. It all started when her son slid into the DMs on Instagram.
Yep.
He had no game.
He was lost.
He was dazed and confused. He's like, I think we're in the same ward. And I was like, no, bro, I've never seen you before in my life. He's like, oh, want to go on a date? I was like, wow, that was smooth. Good going.
Yep.
So we met on FaceTime literally. I think we'd been dating for 2 weeks. So we were probably engaged at that point. And
I met you as you were walking down the aisle.
Yeah, basically. It's like 90 Day Fiance.
Right.
BYU I do.
Sounds like a new reality show.
That is a reality show.
Yep.
So, yes, if you haven't gathered by now, this is my mother-in-law.
And this is my daughter-in-law.
But she also happens to be a startup founder. Do you consider it a startup?
Absolutely.
I guess. Yeah. A startup founder. She's in a very extremely male-dominated industry. Are you like the only female in that industry, I think?
We're a very small percentage for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's wild. What has that been like?
You know, it's actually been really interesting. I grew up on a ranch, so, working alongside men was something I grew up doing. So it never fazed me. I never even hardly notice it until people like you bring it up.
I know.
I don't even hardly think about it. But yeah, most of the time I spend my time in meetings with men, doing projects.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the same thing. I'm used to being like the only girl, and people ask me the same question, and I'm like, I didn't notice till you brought it up, but Thanks for bringing it up. But I guess it's something that a lot of people want to hear about. So
yeah, it's actually been interesting. What I found though is that you have to know your material. You can't, fake your way into it. You have to know the industry, and you have to be good at what you do, and you have to be able to serve and to bring value to the table. Mm-hmm. And people respect you regardless of your gender.
Yeah, people really don't care that much. How did you get into doing what you do now? Tell the people about you and what you do.
All right. So a long time ago, I actually started learning computers when I was in high school. They just barely had come out. And so I went to college. That was, projected to be the top industry. So I went to college for that. And then I ended up having a career in healthcare in IT leadership for several decades, and did a lot in healthcare. There was so much transformation that occurred during those years with HIPAA and electronic medical records, and bringing all of the diagnostic equipment to digital, like digital x-ray.
Yeah.
They call it PACS now. So there was so much digital transformation. I literally implemented hundreds of projects, hundreds of interfaces, making all of these systems connect, and then getting into the electronic health exchange. That was exciting. We were kind of on the leading edge with that. So had lots of opportunity as the technology has evolved over the years to be involved at the ground floor with a lot of it.
Yeah.
And so healthcare came and went, and I pivoted and changed my focus. I started a IT business and was doing IT consulting, and then COVID hit and all the healthcare projects got canceled.
Yep.
So then I pivoted again and went into MSP, managed service provider for IT, and really went into manufacturing at that time because they managed to figure out a way to stay open during COVID.
Right.
And so during that pivot, during that transition, found out that the Department of Defense was implementing a cybersecurity program for all of the defense contractors. And that's been evolving for the last 4 years, been watching it, been learning about it, been growing with it. And we are on the eve right now of the CMMC program law going into effect. And it is exciting. And for many manufacturers, it's going to be terrifying. So this is this is a really unique time right now because it hasn't quite dropped and there's still a few questions.
Yes. So basically, you own a company that's about to be a multi-billion-dollar company.
You know, it could be absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
It really could.
It's going to be insane. So you mentioned you pivoted several times. And I feel like in the online space especially, I don't know if it's like all business or if it's like just the online space, but everyone treats like pivoting like it's a dirty word.
Oh, yeah.
Pivoting isn't failing.
No, pivoting for me was actually seeing where the need was.
Yeah.
And sometimes you think the need is one thing, and then when you get into that industry and you find out it's really something else. And so really understanding what the industry needs is where I'm at right now.
Yeah, 100%. Well, that was the same thing with us when we started because we were doing management and then we shifted into consulting or pivoted into consulting. And that was exactly it. It's because it's what people needed.
Yeah.
And I think people are like, oh, I had to pivot. And it's like, that's not a bad thing. That means that you were responding to the needs of your consumers, which is exactly what you should be doing as a business owner.
Well, when you stop and think about it, the MSP business right now is a red ocean. You are competing and you're taking business away from someone else.
Yeah.
Rarely are you getting brand new business that's greenfield.
Right.
But pivoting to this Department of Defense cybersecurity program, it was like a whole blue ocean.
Yeah.
It was wide open. It's a brand new market. It's a brand new demand. And so it was really, and to me, it's more critical for the freedom of our country. When you stop and think about the cybersecurity and the defense and why they implemented this, that's what really matters.
Right.
And so it really touches on the risk to our freedom.
Which is just insane to think about.
Yeah, yeah.
It's kind of scary. So speaking of security, like every business owner in the world is probably making huge mistakes in terms of security, right? I'm
not going to accuse everyone, but
you've just about had a panic attack when you heard about the way I was managing things.
We did have a little heart-to-heart.
We had a heart-to-heart conversation.
Yep.
What are like the top mistakes businesses are making that it's like you could low-key lose your business?
All right, so here's the deal. 60% of businesses that suffer a cyber attack go out of business in 6 months.
Yeah.
They just can't sustain the loss. They can't recover. Either they lose business, they lose customers, they miss their delivery deadlines, or they pay the ransom and lose cash.
Yeah.
And so when you look at it from that perspective, the risk is really, really high. There's probably like 3 or 4 easy things you can do right now that will save a lot of headache. Now, I'm not ever going to say it's going to prevent a ransom attack because what we're seeing right now is new attacks every single day.
Yeah.
So there's not one thing that you can do, but there are several things you can do that put layers of security in. And that's what you want to think about is you want to think about it as layers of security. It's not just one thing is going to stop everything.
Right.
So the first thing you can do is make sure you have long passwords, at least 15 characters. Most things will let you put a phrase in now. So don't do like a whole string of random characters. Use a phrase for your password and put it in a password manager. Bitwarden has a free option. It does have a paid option for like an enterprise, so you can share your passwords for certain accounts with staff or something like that if you had a need for it. But there's a free Bitwarden version. So number one, put all your passwords in Bitwarden, and it'll actually tell you if your passwords are on the dark web.
Yeah.
So make sure you reset those passwords, make them long. The other thing that you want to do is turn MFA on, multi-factor authentication, or two-factor authentication, it's sometimes called.
Even though it's a pain.
And guess what? Bitwarden will hold your two-factor for you.
Yeah.
So it's super easy when you learn how to do it. So number one, long passwords and 2FA. The other thing you want to do is want to make sure you turn your firewall on your devices. Make sure you have your firewall on and you have a good antivirus. And the
Okay.
last thing I'm going to recommend, make sure you back up your data.
Mm.
Make sure you have a good backup. It's offline. It's separate from where your data is so that you have the ability to recover. So even if you do get ransomware, you just recover your data and you're good to go.
Okay. And you said Bitwarden. Can you just really briefly tell people why not like 1Pass or whatever the heck it's called, or saving to Google Chrome? Like, why is that bad?
Okay. Bitwarden has an encrypted vault so that the vault itself is encrypted, and the only thing that unlocks it is your password. So even if the Bitwarden data on the back end gets breached, they're not going to be able to get to your passwords without your long password to your vault. There are other password managers that have been breached, and the encryption has been breached. So they have access to all of your accounts, all of your usernames, and all your passwords. That's a bad thing. Bitwarden has a better architecture from that standpoint.
Yeah.
What was the second question?
Google Chrome passwords.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about Google Chrome. Don't do it. Turn it off. Take all of those passwords out of Google Chrome and put them in Bitwarden. If you do that, when you download those passwords out of Google Chrome, you will create a CSV, a comma separated file on your computer, and you upload that into Bitwarden. Don't forget to go back and delete that CSV file because that's all your username and passwords right there in plain text.
Yeah.
So make sure you do a hard delete on that. Google Chrome, those passwords being stored in the cloud like that are not secure. Now, Edge is integrated. If you have Microsoft, you can integrate your Edge passwords with your Microsoft account and be able to use Edge, and it's more secure than Google Chrome. But please don't put passwords in Google Chrome, please.
Can you? My iPad died, but it's okay because I remember what we were going to talk about. Can you also tell people? Remember what you were telling me when we were at the hotel, and like people can like email you and then like get access to your bank account, and it's like a whole thing.
Oh, so like if your email gets breached. All right, so here's what happens. Here's why it's important to have long passwords. If your email, for example, gets breached, what they do is we think of threat actors as being behind a keyboard and typing stuff and trying stuff, and you think, oh, they're not going to have the patience to figure out, my special doggy with my birth date,
Right.
But that's not what they do. They have programs and scripts, and they have access to all of the passwords that are on the dark web already. And so they just try that. And so if they figure out what your password is to your email and they crack that, then guess what? It's possible that you've used that same password for your LinkedIn account, your Instagram account, your MyFitnessPal, my Word Game, my whatever. So
your Stripe account,
your bank account. And so most people are using the same password or a variation of it for all of their accounts. So number one, once they figure out one password, even though you think it's to your email and it doesn't matter, well, they're going to turn around and use that same username and password on bank accounts and other things like that. So now they actually have access to your bank accounts. And if you look at your bank agreement, your banking agreement doesn't always say that they're going to protect you against that kind of fraud.
Right.
So anyway, you want to make sure you have long passwords and don't reuse your passwords, and that's why. And even a variation of putting a number at the end is not strong enough to protect your bank account.
Yeah.
Make sure it's at least 15 characters long.
Yeah, that's good advice. Well, because I think people always are like, that's not going to happen to me.
Right.
I'm not a multi-billion-dollar company. I'm not Microsoft. Nobody's trying to hack me. I'm not Apple. But the reality is like the nature of the businesses that most of us have is like, even if you have 10,000 followers on TikTok, I bet you've gotten a hate comment before. I bet you have people that are sliding into your DMs, like picking on you every once in a while. Like if you think for a second that those people aren't going to like come after you, they will.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to really think about it because you may think you're not big enough, but the reality of it is small businesses every day are getting attacked. Small single dentist offices are getting attacked. And sometimes they're really not looking for you. They're looking to leverage from you to one of your business partners that's bigger than you. So and once they have access to your email, they can actually send legitimate emails out of your email account that look real, and people can be deceived by it.
Well, and this is an important conversation too, because there's a lot of people that hire like subcontractors. Like we hire a social media manager, a copywriter, a graphic designer, and we just like, we Slack them our login or we put it in ClickUp or whatever.
Yep.
And also if they're, then what you're saying is if their email has been breached. So even if that is a small social media manager with 1,000 Instagram followers, if I hire that social media manager and then I have a larger business, then they're using them basically as a Trojan horse to get into mine.
Absolutely. And that is how Cisco got hacked. They had a contractor that had access to the help desk, and he was working on the help desk. He was doing his job. He got breached through his, I believe it was through his Google passwords. And they got in, and then they pivoted to Cisco. And then since he was on the help desk, you should have only had access to help desk information, but they had made him a system admin. So now he had administrative level access to the whole network.
Wow.
And so then they owned the whole, they were able to compromise the whole environment.
Yeah, it's not about whether or not you trust your social media manager. It's whether or not your social media manager is actually like secure.
Right. Whether they have good security practices. And sometimes they'll be breached and not even know it for months and months. So
yeah. Is there are there certain questions that like maybe we can ask if we're like, now I'm picking on social media managers everywhere, but if we're going to hire somebody to manage our social media, because that's like super common, or a web designer, what should we ask them to make sure that like when we're giving them access to our stuff, that we're not just like letting somebody into our business basically?
That's a really good question. So one, you'd want to see if they have antivirus and a firewall on, and have them do a scan of their network, of their computer. The other thing is you want to store those passwords in Bitwarden and share them to them through Bitwarden, not put them into Slack or one of those other channels. And so that'll make a difference.
Okay. I love that. Okay. So you've done consulting. You've like run a ton of different, like done for you versus like consulting. Do you feel like, what are the biggest differences that you've found in like scalability when it comes to consulting versus like done for you services?
You know, that is a really good question. So when I've done, it's interesting because I've done different kinds of things. So one of my most interesting projects was I was doing consulting for a healthcare system in Southern California, and they had 50 hospitals across the country. Half of them had not gotten onto the new platform that they were putting in for their electronic medical record. They were still on their legacy system. And they had 44 projects that were languishing across these 22 hospitals. And so I went in and implemented this modified sprint routine to where we would introduce a project one week, we would test it the next week, we'd have the users train on it the following week, and then go live. So like in a 4-week span, each one of those projects, and they were mini projects, but each one would be going live, and we would have multiple projects concurrent across these 22 hospitals, all at different stages. And so that was a really, really fascinating project. And it's kind of interesting. One of the users, when we first started, she was like, this is the stupidest thing I ever heard of. I really don't want to do this. And I'm like, you know, I'm with the corporate office. This is our mandate. You have to participate. You know, it's not optional. And a year later at the end of this project, she goes, I just have to say, this has been the best meeting ever. It's the only meeting where we get stuff done. I love this meeting. And she was sorry to see it end, but we'd gotten so much done, you know? And so when you look at consulting like that on that scale, being able to implement 44 projects across 22 hospitals was, you know, a really exciting time. It wasn't without its challenges, for sure.
Right.
But then you look at doing done-for-you projects. And, you know, some of those are really, really rewarding. We did one project for a high school, a really large high school.
I remember this. Yes.
And, you know, it was COVID had just kicked off. They had all of these network problems. They needed all this new technology refreshed, and
Right.
it was a massive project, but it was very, very rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
And so you look at that, and so you're able to go in, do a project, get it done, and get out. And
Mm-hmm.
so from that way, some of those have a little bit more closure, but you're also able to really influence kind of sometimes a wider audience when you're doing done for you, because
Mm-hmm.
we touched a lot of people in that organization, and so that was really rewarding.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and now you're with this latest pivot, you really are pivoting now, even not even to consulting, you're going from more done for you and consulting into coaching
Yeah, yeah.
and even more of like a passive model. How do you feel about it?
It's really interesting because when the whole industry started shifting around the defense industry,
Yeah.
I was like, I was really looking at what's going on in the industry, and looking at the long range impact. So what happens if you have these big prime organizations that are humongous, and then do you realize that 85% of the defense contractors are 100 employees or less?
Wow.
85% of the defense manufacturers are 85 employees or less.
See, when I think of defense industry, I think Lockheed Martin.
Exactly. You only think of Boeing,
Yeah.
Lockheed, Northrop Grumman. You think of the big ones.
But in my defense, I grew up in King Carl.
All right. So yeah, that was your backyard.
Yeah.
But in rural Oregon, we have these small contractors, and they're
Yeah.
mom and pop shops. They've got, they're founder led. They're usually, really small organizations. And when I started looking at, all right, what's going to be the impact with this cybersecurity thing? Because
Yeah.
the contractors were really pushing back, saying, we can't afford this. We don't have that much technology in our business.
Right.
We're not worried about the computers. We're worried about the quality of our product.
Mhm.
And so you start looking at it. And I really started looking at it and going, all right, long term, if these contractors don't get on board, they're going to get absorbed by the big guys.
Yeah.
It's just going to be one monopoly after another. They're just going to start,
Mhm.
absorbing them. They're going to start selling out because they don't get contracts, because that's what's going to happen. If they don't have the cybersecurity controls in place and have a third-party auditor certify that they have them in place,
Mhm.
they're not going to be able to get any more contract awards.
Right.
And so when you start looking at that, then I start saying, all right, these guys need a way to be able to get there. And
Mhm.
what was in the market, and what's in the market right now, the traditional way is project management and consulting services, these
Yep.
done for you projects. And they could cost
Hundreds of thousands.
hundreds of thousands,
Yeah.
easy. One organization charges, many organizations charge at a minimum 10 to 12,000 for a gap assessment.
Should we add them?
Some of them are charging 20 to 30,000 or more just for a gap assessment that identifies what needs to be done.
That's
haven't
unhinged.
Move the needle, and all it is what comes out of it is a great big long project with hundreds of thousands of projects or hours to do
Mhm.
all of the work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, we started talking to manufacturers and finding out none of them have done anything.
Right.
And the DIBCAC, the Defense Industrial Base Cybersecurity organization, they started auditing some of these contractors, and they audited 300.
Mm-hmm.
And out of the 300, no, sorry, it wasn't 300. Yeah, maybe it was. Anyway, out of the 300, there was like maybe 3 that were close to getting it right.
Wow.
The rest of them were not even close.
This is like really relevant for our audience too, because you're doing a course,
Mm-hmm.
but it's high ticket.
Yes.
And lots of people, I'm going to call you guys out with love, of course.
Bring it on.
Some of you guys are out here acting like you're asking for a kidney when you're selling a $200 course.
Yeah, we're a bit above that.
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit.
A little bit. Do you care if I talk about it?
Nope, go
No?
ahead.
Okay. So we're raising the price to, what did we decide? 57,000?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we're going up to 57,000 for a course. Now, granted, the ROI on this is millions.
Correct. Yeah.
So when we talk about pricing offers, right? For a lot of people, they're like, well, if it's a passive course and I'm not actively doing anything, I can't justify charging more than 2 blueberries and a box of rocks.
Right, right.
So how did you go about pricing this offer?
My pricing is based on a cost basis. So what I did was I just started putting together and tabulating how much, there's some software, there's some platforms, there's some licensing that goes into it.
Right.
Then I started looking at how much labor it's going to take to support. So even though you're subscribing to a coaching platform, there's also going to be live calls. There's going to be one-on-one calls. There's project management with it. So I've built out a project management plan to help you track it. We support you in the background. We've built out linkages in the compliance tracker software that saves you hundreds of hours of time if you were doing this from just scratch or doing it on your own. So we've put together this program that saves thousands of hours. And what it does is it walks your team through how to do this. And what was surprising to me, here's the thing I found out. There are lots of security individuals out there that have the information. They know cybersecurity, they know technology, but what they don't understand is what's required to pass this CMMC audit. And everybody thinks it's, I just got to turn on my antivirus. I got to configure my firewall. I need to have a FIPS certified firewall. But that is only less than 30% of the program is implementing the technology and implementing it right.
I was going to say, that's like the bare minimum.
That's the bare minimum.
That's not even the first module.
Exactly. What's really required when you look at this is you have to put policies and procedures in place. They have to be operational. They can't be just sitting on a shelf somewhere that nobody even knows what's in them.
Right.
They have to be customized to your organization, and we provide those templates. So now we've pre-built templates for your organization. We walk you through how to customize that for your organization. I mean, it is step by step. We give you a checklist of everything you need to do. We help you implement monitoring. We help you do all of the creating your whole body of evidence and then writing that conformity statement. So this process is highly technical in the documentation and the structure. And it's as technical there as it is in the actual technology you have to implement. And that's the thing that I'm finding people do not understand is what does it take to actually implement to do that? And then once you find it, the amount of work is overwhelming. So what I did was I built this coaching program that walks you through, as long as you know the technology. I'm not going to train somebody off the street. I'm not going to train you on how to implement a firewall, okay? But if you had a tech in your business, you had somebody who's supporting your firewall,
right?
I would tell them what needs to be done to be configured correctly, what documentation you need to generate, how you need to monitor it, and what you need to do to audit it. And then we actually help you do what I love to call mock audits. And then that's where we help you learn how to talk to auditors, how to walk them through what they need to be able to certify you.
Yeah. Well, and that comes back to like what I always tell people is like, if you want to charge a high ticket price, you have to solve a high ticket problem.
This is do you want to know how much they charge for an audit?
Tell us.
It's generally, they can get it down now to under a 3-week process. There's generally a week or two offsite where you have to generate all your policies, procedures, all your evidence. You have to give all of that to them before they come on site. They spend a couple of weeks going through all of that. Then they come on site for a week. And right now, even for small organizations, they're paying $45,000 and up for an audit. Now, larger organizations can spend $100,000 per site. I mean, it's the lowest I've seen any of the auditors is hovering right around $50,000.
Yeah. Well, and so they're paying hundreds of thousands potentially to even just get the audit done. And if they don't pass the audit,
if they don't pass the audit, number one, they can't get awarded any more contracts.
So they make $0.
Yep. You're going to start losing revenue. You're going to start losing. The other thing, I'm glad you brought this up. I am so glad you brought this up.
I'm dying to talk about this for a hot minute.
Everybody thinks the risk is you're not going to be awarded a contract. Now, the defense industry said, we're going to phase this in over 5 years. So day one, you're not all going to lose contracts.
Mhm.
However, the Defense Department has been putting the new clause that says you have to have this at time of award. They have been putting this in, like, it has skyrocketed the number of contracts that they're putting this in. So the concern is that this isn't going to be phased in over 5 years. This is going to be phased in. I mean, it's going to hit and hit hard and fast.
Mhm.
The other thing that happened was they said your subcontractors also have to be certified. And I don't think anybody expected that. So that's one thing we're waiting to see if that's in the final rule. But here's the thing. You worry about losing revenue if you're not certified when the contract you want to bid on is time for award.
Right.
But what people don't realize is that employees are watching you.
Yeah.
And we are already seeing employees moving from one organization to another, because if the organization they're working at, even if they have a good job, even if they like them, if they're not taking CMMC seriously, the sales team, they're moving on. And we're already seeing the shift. So you can start losing your best employees. You can start losing your most productive or highly skilled technicians in your industry. And you could start losing them just because you're not taking this serious and you're not showing them that you're looking out for the future of your company.
Well, that's any company in any industry.
Mhm.
You set the tone, and I believe that the fish rots from the head, so to speak.
Yes.
And so it's like you set the tone for that, and if your employees start to lose trust in the founder, you've lost them.
Right. If they lose confidence, you're going to be able to get contracts. They're not going to go down with a sinking ship.
Mm-mm.
And let me just tell you, a lot of companies think we'll get to it when we need to. As soon as it comes out, we'll take it serious and then we'll put resources on it and do it. And that's our plan.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me tell you, if you're not doing anything now, this isn't a 30-day project. I don't care how many resources you throw at it.
It's a 90-day sprint.
Most companies, when they start this, it takes them a year.
Yeah.
Some companies that haven't done anything, it might take them a year and a half. So this is not a real easy, just throw some money and resources out and it's done.
Yeah.
It takes some time to implement all of these controls.
Well, and so many businesses think that's the answer to everything, is like throw money at it. Throw money at every problem.
Mhm.
And that's the issue. And the problem is that it requires time, and oftentimes it requires the founder's attention. It's not a matter of like send your contractor in to deal with it. It's you have to be aware that this is a problem. And again, it goes back to the trust of your people.
And that's actually part of the new program, is it requires the CEO or a top executive to sign off and be part of the plan and the implementation of the whole thing. It doesn't mean they have to go program the firewall,
Right.
but it does mean they have to sign off and adopt the policy. They have to sign off on the plan, and they have to be part of the communication plan. So it's not something that you can just say, this is an IT problem, go give it to IT and let them fix it. Because here's the reason why. Everybody thinks this is an IT problem because it's cyber. Well, guess what? IT generally does not know where your FCI, your federal contract information, and your controlled unclassified information is. IT is supporting systems, but they don't know what classification of data is in which systems. So their job is to support all the systems, back them up, protect them, configure them, give people access. But they don't know which systems have the FCI or CUI in them. And so this cannot be just delegated to IT and say, go solve this. And that's one of the big problems we see is these projects go to IT and IT looks at it and goes, I don't even know where to start with this. I don't know what systems are in scope. And then they just go into a dark hole and never come out again.
Yeah.
And so it really takes a multidisciplinary team to actually make this project functional and to actually get the work done.
Well, and I see that with a lot of businesses, even that we work with, is like the founder decides something, they give it to one of the team members. They're like, here, you have to do this. And then they're like, well, I don't know what you want. And then the person either gets fired or, there's a whole trickle down effect. And it's like, well, again, you set the tone.
Mm-hmm.
You set the expectation. It's your job to lead by example, showcase what you want things to actually look like in your organization. And if there's no oversight, if there's no adoption, and if there's no like actual implementation from the top down, nothing's going to change.
Well, and if you look at what cybersecurity, what CMMC stands for, it's Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. So what they really want to see is a culture shift. They want to see mature cybersecurity operations in play. And that really truly does require a culture shift. If employees don't understand how to recognize a phishing email that has a whole bunch of red flags in it, your business is at risk. And so I see lots of businesses, and that's the number one risk, is you have employees clicking on phishing emails and putting their credentials in, and now their email account is compromised. Yeah. And so it starts at the top, and it has to be reinforced. It has to be modeled exactly like you said. And really, communication is a huge, huge part of it. Yeah. Communication is probably one of the biggest components that determines whether a project is successful or not. Yeah. It really, truly makes a huge difference. If people understand what's coming and what their role is and what's expected of them, then they're happy to support it. But when there's no communication, they don't know what it is, and so they ignore it. And so really helping leaders be better communicators is one of the best things I've seen that helps make projects be successful. Yeah. Yeah. I would completely agree with that. Okay, let's talk more about like hiring, team management, because I think that's a good segue. You've managed and hired and fired a lot of people. Yes. And you've helped me fire some people. And prevented you from firing some people. Yes. Talked you off the cliff. Talked me off the edge. Yeah. So when you're looking at hiring somebody in any organization for any role, what is something where you're like, this is a non-negotiable, this, like, they have to have this? Well, that's a great question. And having been in several different organizations, you really have to look at what the culture of the organization is and what you want the fit to be. So for the most part, if I feel like they're going to be a good fit with the team, and even if they don't have the exact skills I want, you can always train them for skills as long as they have a good attitude. Yep. The other two things that I have found are absolutely critical is understanding how much responsibility and accountability they take. Because if you find employees that feel like, well, I just did my best, and, it really makes a huge difference in what they bring to the table and how engaged they are. And it comes down to how much responsibility they take for work assigned to them. And then are they accountable to it? And do they hold themselves accountable? Yeah, proactivity versus like reactivity is everything. Well, and we've talked about that with our team is like if you have somebody doing your job and doing your job well are two different things. Yeah. And sometimes that's something that like you can't put in an SOP. Nope. You can't always train that either. Like you can't train somebody to care and use their brain. Right. It's like it's a certain level of innate. And like you said, skills can be taught. Yep. But proactivity and common sense. Engagement. Yes. Yep. Cannot be. One of the things I found is that you can, when you're onboarding someone, they really need some one-on-one time. They need to understand, where all the assets are, all the building blocks, all of the resources that they need to do their job. Yeah. They really need to understand what the vision is, what your vision is for their role and what they can do in that. And what I've found is if you've hired the right person and put them in the right chair, now you can put them in the wrong chair and you're not going to get anywhere. It's a job they don't like. It's a job they're not comfortable with. A whole bunch of things can go wrong. But if you get somebody that has the right skill and you put them in the right chair and it's something that they're engaged in, they can actually take off and go further and do so much more with that than what you even dreamed of.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had employees that, once I figure out what their skill set is, and a lot of times I'll give an employee something just to see where they go with it, and just really look at what parts of it did they gravitate to, what parts of it did they ask questions on, how far did they take it before they raised their hand and said, hey, I need help. You start looking at employees, and once you kind of see what their style is, then you can help manage and coach them in the best way that they're successful. Some employees really got to figure it out themselves, and you telling them isn't going to, they have to sit down and process it themselves. Other employees can't process it on their own. They need you to give them the roadmap and show them where everything is. And so you kind of, as a manager, if you really want to have the best team possible, you have to be able to flex and help each employee in the way that they need help. And then what you see is you start getting a team that's really dynamic and a team that really is productive. And then you hit this sweet spot, and you can, the sky's the limit when that happens.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I've noticed that with our team, and I know that that's a gap that I have is like management, because I'm not a micromanager. I'm like, here's what I want, go. And so if there's like more clarification, I'm like, I don't understand what you don't understand.
Yep.
That was so clear. What else do you want from me?
I've learned to say, it was so clear to me when I said it. Because it's clear to me. And sometimes you find that, I'll give you an example. So we were working on some marketing stuff, and a couple of the team members were working on this process, and they're kind of pitching me on what this new process is going to be, and they keep saying, well, it'll be in production, and we'll do this and do this and do this, and then in production, and then we'll bring it to you for final sign off. And I am like totally confused, and I'm like, I'm just really confused, because in my world, in technology, we write contracts first productive use. Once it's in production, it's live. In their world, production was while they were making the sausage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so for them, it was perfectly clear what they were talking about. And for me, I'm just sitting there listening to the whole thing going, why are we doing all of this stuff after we've released it? It made no sense. When in reality, the way they were using the word. And so
yeah,
even just the word production, you think it's a word and you know what it means, but in different contexts,
it means something completely different.
Yeah. So for them, in production means they're editing and cutting and adding volume, or adding sound or whatever. And for me, production is it's live and it's in production, it's full productive use.
Right.
And so anyway, so yeah, you can get really you can help your team member get really confused sometimes. And I've done it. It goes both ways.
Yeah, that happens. Well, and I think exactly what you said is an interesting point, because you are somebody who has a very technical background.
Yeah.
You have a lot of technical skills, and marketing
is not
one of them.
Marketing is not. Actually, I beg to differ, because marketing is technical from an audiovisual standpoint. I mean, all of the camera and audio gear, all of that's highly technical, but none of it correlates to anything I know.
It's the strategic communication aspect that's difficult for people. Yeah. Well, and the thing is like, you are not alone in that, because it's like every founder in the world is like, oh, this product is so good, it'll sell itself. And it's like, no, you have to sell it. Well, no, I'm the business owner. I'm the founder. I'm not a marketer. I'm not a salesperson. When you become a founder, you become a marketer.
You become all of that. I realized.
Yeah.
Yes. And marketing has been probably the most challenging piece for me.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because it's always been something I've feared. And so when I got some coaching from you and Soren, he was like, it's not that hard, Mom. Just do it. And I was like, where have I heard those words? It's just not fair when your kid has to echo back your own words, as a parent, You're
like, wow, this sounds familiar. I don't like that.
I hate it when he uses my own words against me. But what was interesting was, with just a little bit of coaching, and once I changed my frame of reference to
Yeah.
how can I serve and how can I be helpful? What are these founders really, what are they struggling with? What are their challenges? How can I help them?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I sat down and shot, almost an hour's worth of content just by changing my frame of reference
Yep.
and thinking about it differently.
Yeah. When
And
you go
so-
from selling to serving, it's so easy.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
so easy.
It was, instead of, it made a huge difference. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
That's interesting to me because I think for most people, I mean, lots of people struggle with marketing, but I think lots of people feel way ickier about sales
Oh, for
than
sure.
they do about marketing.
Yep.
You don't feel any type of way about sales?
Oh, sales is just as painful for me too. I mean, I've always, and this is the interesting thing, I've always been on the other side of the table. I've always been the buyer and not the seller. So sales is so foreign to me. And so now that I'm on the other side of the table, it's just plain awkward. But I found that it's easier for me to relate and talk to these business owners. I had dinner one night with this manufacturer, and he was, pretty shy and really didn't want to, say too much.
Yeah.
But what was interesting was when I started talking to him about what his challenges were, because they just had done this big revamp and this big overhaul.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we started talking about his challenges, and then he just like opened up, and I was like,
Yep.
oh, this isn't so hard.
You're
can
like, I
do
figured
this."
it out.
Yeah, all you have to do is be interested in what his challenges are. And
Mhm.
he was, he just sat there and talked all evening. And I learned a lot about CNC operations.
Yep.
So anyway, it was really fascinating.
Yeah. No, that's literally all you have to do to make a sale is you ask somebody about their problems and you listen long enough until you have all the information to be like, okay, this is how my product solves those problems.
Or you find out their problems aren't your
product.
Aren't your product. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Which
Yeah.
is fine too. And you don't have to force it.
Yep,
Which-
exactly.
Looking at you, TikTok. Oh my gosh. It's rough out there. It really is. It's spooky season out there in the internet.
And actually, you realize October is Cybersecurity Month. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
It sure is.
Are you celebrating?
We are celebrating. We should actually have a challenge, a cybersecurity challenge for October.
What would that be?
I don't know. Do one thing to be cyber secure in October.
Stop saving your passwords in Chrome in October.
There you go. Move them to Bitwarden. Just do one thing.
Stop using LastPass in October.
Don't use LastPass for sure. They got breached.
They got breached. You can make some really funny TikToks hating on LastPass. You'd go so viral.
I don't want to hate on anybody.
I'm working on it, you guys.
Like I said, I'm old school. I don't want to be controversial. I don't want any hate mail.
Just this morning, I got 2 death threats.
Yeah, like I said.
That's just a Tuesday. Is today Tuesday?
Today's
It is
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
All day.
It's just a Tuesday.
Unless it rains.
Unless it rains. That must be an Oregon thing.
It was my grandpa's thing. He used to say that. It's Tuesday unless it rains.
Unless it rains. I love that. That's really funny.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I know I have several. Well, I actually have 2 more sections of questions for you.
Okay. Fire away.
Let's talk about public speaking.
Oh, let's do.
So, you've recently been speaking at some conferences.
I have.
So, at what point do you feel like it's worthwhile for a founder to be like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go public speak?
Great question. When is public speaking worthwhile?
Yeah.
It's interesting because public speaking was never really like a dream of mine.
Mm-hmm.
I went to lots of conferences over the course of my years.
And you were never like, that could be me up there one day.
The thought never crossed my mind.
Huh.
And so
You're like, I hope that's never me.
I never thought that either.
Oh.
I just, I just went to, I had to go to conferences and it was just a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but now I have found that I have a message and I'm passionate and I want to share it. And really, that's the best platform and the best way to get the information out and to really have a voice, especially in this time that we're in right now.
Besides TikTok, if you would make a TikTok.
I tried today, but evidently I don't have any followers. I might have just got on TikTok.
Slay. Anywho.
You know why I can't morally be on TikTok is because of all of the spyware in it. But anyway.
The security risk.
The security risk is real. But anyway, we will have a separate device dedicated to TikTok.
The irony.
The irony of it.
The cybersecurity person marketing on TikTok.
Yep.
I love it.
There is just a little irony there. Yep.
Iconic.
Yep. The thing I found, though, with speaking is that it is really, I've done several and I've learned something from each one. What's interesting, though, I found is that I did one where we were, had my topic, had my thing, was going through it. And I had already prepared this. But when I went to the conference, I had the opportunity to set in on a couple of sessions before mine, and it was in a specific track. Mm-hmm. And so as I was sitting through those other presentations, I started hearing a theme of questions that were coming up. So then when I got to my presentation, it wasn't that I actually changed my presentation, but I framed my my comments to answer the questions that they had been coming up in the earlier sessions that had not gotten answered. And so I was able to work all of that into my context. And that actually created a really interesting opportunity to where after my presentation, I had a line of folks and we sat there and had a really good conversation because I was able to really connect with them and help them solve a problem. Mm-hmm. One of the things I found, though, is that when you do a presentation, number one, if you understand, what the need is and what the questions were, and that's where I found sitting in on those earlier sessions and hearing all of the questions that were coming up, but weren't being answered in the presentations. So one, I felt like I was able to add a lot of value. And the other thing I found is that when I'm doing presentations, I just give it all away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's not like I give them half of the story and then say, oh, you got to sign up to get the rest of it. Mm-hmm. Whatever the topic is that I'm talking on, I go through the whole thing and I just lay it out. One of my favorite presentations we did, I was co-speaking with a vendor, and what we did was set the presentation up as a Jeopardy game.
Yes.
And that actually turned out, we had a catch mic that we could throw around to the audience. Mm-hmm. They got to choose the category and the question. And what was interesting was watching where the categories were that they went to, because then they kind of got to drive the agenda. Right. And so we really had to be on our toes because we both had to have answers for all of the questions on the board. Mm-hmm. And what we found was because we had the catchbox mics, it then became an interactive discussion. And so they would read the question and then we would both answer it both from a vendor and an MSP perspective. And then that just led to more and more dialogue and discussion with the audience. And it became really, really engaging. And there wasn't anybody in the room on their phone. Right. That's how you gauge whether they're paying attention.
Yes.
Are they heads down with their phone glowing and, doom scrolling through reels or whatever. And they were all vying for an opportunity to get the mic. And what was interesting, it was a 3-day conference. For 2 days after our presentation, I had people coming up to me saying, that was the best presentation ever. And one guy even said, I can't believe you guys just let us ask any question we wanted. We were asking questions that weren't even on the board, that weren't even on the categories. And, you guys were handling everything. And he was like, I am just so impressed.
But it shows how knowledgeable you are if you're able to field those questions.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun. And like I said, we got so much feedback. So because that was so successful, I've really looked at how I can incorporate interaction into all of my presentations. Even if you're kind of up on a stage, there's still lots of ways to get audience engagement.
100%. So would you say it's like you need to have an offer, like you need to have something to sell if you're going, right? But I think and you hit the nail on the head. A lot of people will tell me, well, and same thing with content, same thing with public speaking. I don't want to give too much away.
Oh, yeah.
I don't believe in that, because in my opinion, information isn't valuable. Implementation is.
Yep.
And so I can give you everything and you can still not be able to do it.
Absolutely.
And so like I can stand on stage and I can even just today with the summit I did, it was like I gave them everything. All the buyer types, how to identify them, how to speak to them, how to create content for them. Are they going to be able to actually go and do it without me? Probably not.
Right. Yeah. And
so that's the thing, is like, I don't think that there's any such thing as like giving too much away, which is why when like you said before, like when you shift kind of your frame of reference when it comes to even marketing, when you go from selling to serving, everything changes.
Yeah. Yep.
100%. What do you feel like the outcome of public speaking for your business has been? Has it gotten you a lot of business? Is it more just like credibility, notoriety? Like, what do you feel like people should expect to come out of speaking events?
That's a really good question. So one of the things I found that's happened, some of the events that I've spoken at have also had vendor booths. And so I've had both the vendor booth plus I've done part of presentation. One of the things I found is that it really helps them understand who you are and what your personality is and how your program is, even if you're not talking specific, because most of the time when I'm doing a presentation, I'm not selling anything on the stage.
No,
I'm giving industry value. I'm solving industry problems, but not selling my solutions.
You're pulling back the curtain as to what it would be like to work with you, essentially.
Exactly. Yep.
Them sitting in the audience with you is like what it would be on a coaching call with you.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
And so from that standpoint, they really get a really good sense for that. Some of this content, you can post it on YouTube, and so it becomes evergreen then. Right. If you just have a booth, people walk by and don't remember you, to me, the booth is not where the value is. The value is actually being on the stage and presenting. And the other thing that happens when you do that, a lot of times people will come up afterwards. They'll have questions. Sometimes they have comments, a story they want to share. I just love that when they come up afterwards and they have a story that they want to add because of, something in the thing. Yeah. The other thing I found is you make connections with the other people that are hosting the event, and that leads to other speaking gigs and other network opportunities. And once you start getting that experience, you get asked to speak in other platforms, and sometimes you don't even know how your name got there, but it's kind of like when you get on a speaking circuit. Yeah. Then it becomes a thing. Once you're in, it's like you have to get your foot in the door. Yep. But once you're in, you're in. And you just keep getting them and getting them and getting them. It's the same thing with press and like PR. Speaking of press and PR. Oh, yeah. You're looking at 2 of the newest Forbes Council members. Why, thank you. Yes. The way we were like literally got like in the same week. I know. That was so odd. That was really weird. Yeah. Yeah. But I think it's like one thing after another, because we did the one Business Insider and it's just been like one thing after that. And I think it's the exact same way with speaking, is like one person will see you and it just kind of snowballs and snowballs and snowballs. Yep. And
I do think that you have to be like savvy though about leveraging it, because I think you can go to an event and get nothing out of it, or
Yes.
you can go and really, really network and connect with people and get other opportunities out of it. And like you said, you can, film it and leverage it for content and, share it and really leverage it for credibility. And I think people are really afraid to like humble brag. And I'm going to call you out too. You are like, you are so afraid to be like, I'm an industry leader, even though you're like the only person in your industry doing what you do. And so like, if you just are less afraid to pat yourself on the back a little bit and like just shout out what you do, then people gravitate towards that. Especially, I won't shut up about the driver buyers. And so I think there's like a way to be really strategic about it. But like, I think that the speaking has been like really impactful for like my business too. And I think that like I'm all for social media marketing. Obviously, like that's a huge pillar of our business, but I think that there's no replacement for that in-person connection. Yeah. And
right now, people are really gravitating towards in-person events.
They're craving it.
Absolutely. Yeah. They really want to have that person-to-person experience and relationship and connection. And that makes a huge difference. And I can just say from experience, and everybody else knows it too, if you're in person, the connection and the content and just your interpretation and the whole context of it is so much more meaningful.
Yeah.
I went to a conference last week, and there was a phenomenal speaker there. And I can tell you that even on Zoom, I could have Zoomed the conference. It would not have been the same as being in the room with him.
Yeah.
And what it wouldn't have happened was I got to have lunch with him afterwards.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that was, his presentation was phenomenal. But lunch with him afterwards, and what's interesting, he came from a healthcare background.
Oh,
so we had
you guys bonded.
we had, I think we have a couple of common peers that we know, and it was just having lunch with him was like something that would have never ever happened if I just Zoomed the conference.
Yeah, 100%. So that leads me into like networking and relationships. Everyone knows that relationships and business are everything.
Yes, they are.
Do you have some like, our audience is very like tangible. Do you have some like tangible takeaways for people as somebody who's like been in the industry for ever about like networking, building relationships, especially like maintaining relationships in business and not having it feel so transactional?
That is a really good question. It's something that I probably struggle with.
Same. That's why I'm asking you.
I don't know if I have any perfect answers for that one, but I will say that a lot of times getting to know somebody, I struggle with people's names.
Yeah.
But if somebody can tell me a story about themselves, I will remember that story and their name
forever.
If I have, some context. And so to me, that makes the connection, and it makes really staying in contact so much easier, because, a lot of times I'll call someone up and say, oh, how's your kid doing in college? Or, how's your mom doing? Or, because it always comes back to family. And so just having that connection and understanding, and, sometimes family is a little bit on the furry side, which is fine. Yep. Sometimes family members are furry.
Yep.
But it's still such a good way to connect with people and find out what's meaningful in their lives, or, something's going on in their area. So like, we've got the hurricane in North Carolina, and now we've got another one hitting in Florida.
Yeah.
Understanding that and reaching out to peers and coworkers and former employees that are in those areas, and just keeping that connection alive when there's something, national like that, makes it real easy to keep those connections alive, and to, then it's not stale if you're reaching out to them for help with a problem or something.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think like I said, I think a lot of people, it feels really transactional. And if you're always just going to somebody like when you need something or when you want something, that feels really inauthentic. And especially with social media, I feel like it's so easy to swipe up on somebody's story or like their post about their kid. Like it doesn't have to be, it's not as difficult, I think, as it once was. How do you feel about LinkedIn?
Oh, I love LinkedIn.
Tell me more about that, because my messages on LinkedIn are inundated with, I'm pretty sure they're like automated bots and they're like scammers.
Oh, yeah, probably.
But you like LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm. Because LinkedIn is where my peeps are. My peeps don't hang out on Instagram, or if they do, I can't find them.
Can't find them.
But LinkedIn is
you can't find them if you don't post.
Okay, guilty as charged. I suppose and you know what's interesting is one of my hobbies is being an oil painter. I do oil painting, fine art oil painting, like portraits and things like that. And when Instagram started, I remember those days when it started, because we had Facebook, we had MySpace, and then Facebook. And I was so excited for Instagram because I thought, man, that's just really going to resonate with me because of,
I can show my paintings.
I just thought that would just so resonate with me, and it just never did. I don't know what to say. I just have never, I don't know. I go on there some, but social media, I'm like a foreigner to social media. It's like a new language to me.
I think a lot of people feel that way. 100%.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to be a consumer, not a creator.
Mm-hmm.
But my rule, and like we've talked about this, is like you don't have to like it, you just have to post it. Like we don't care if you like your own post. That's totally fine. Just post it. And like
oh, and see, that's so hard for me.
I know.
I do a post or I do a video, and then I look back at it, and I just can't even stand to look at it. I can't stand to hear it. I can't. It's just so hard. Can I just be real?
We were literally sitting at the table like 3 days ago, and I clicked on my own YouTube channel. My voice starts playing, and I screamed.
She did. She really did. I thought she was going to throw up. Well, only she was just watching her own video.
I threw up in my mouth a little. I'm not going to lie.
That's how I feel. So I don't know how to get over that. Maybe you can tell me how to get over that.
You don't get over it. That's the point. Like, you never get over it. You just get stronger at pressing the post button.
But I want it to be perfect. I want something to be better.
There's no such thing as perfect or better.
Okay. You just have to get over it.
You just have to get over it, because the thing is only you care what you look like. No one else does. They want to hear what you have to say. Only you care what you sound like. Nobody else does. They just want to hear what you have to say. They don't care how your voice sounds on camera. They just want that information that's going to help their business. They don't care what it sounds like.
Okay. I will keep that in mind. I need a poster.
Write it on your mirror.
Write it on my mirror. Nobody cares. Just post.
Nobody cares. Well, and I have to remind myself that too. And it's hard for me too, because I'm like, nobody cares. And then like 5 minutes later, people are like, what's wrong with your face? I'm like, oh, so they do care.
Yeah, but I told you what to do.
Yes.
Just lean into it, own it. Tell your story.
I just double down.
It's part of who you are. It's part of your personality. It's just
I just come I'm like, oh, got hit with the ugly stick. They don't know what to do. They're like, oh, that backfired. Now it's awkward for both of us. That's the thing, is like, you're going to try to be mean to me. It's not going to work, because I'm going to make it awkward for both of us.
Yeah.
I'm just going to make it weird.
And have fun with it at your expense.
There's no winning here.
Right.
So, my last question.
Yes.
I feel like this is going to be a spicy one, but I've been dying to talk about this for a hot minute, and I think this is a good episode to bring this up.
Okay.
Sweats. What do you think about imposter syndrome?
Oh, that's an interesting one. You know, if I stop and think about it, I get nervous about it. And I think, oh, there's always somebody that knows more than me about this stuff. But then when I stop and think about it, I don't think there's anybody that's implemented as much shit as I have.
Facts.
Sorry for the French word
Mic
there.
drop.
And like you said, it comes down to implementation.
Mm-hmm.
And I can do implementations in my sleep.
Yeah.
I've done so many. I've done $15 million EMR implementations. I have helped build a brand new hospital from the ground up. I mean, do you know how many hospitals get built from the ground up? This was like once in a lifetime thing. And I was a project manager for all of the IT and infrastructure on it.
That's insane.
And so when you look at, I mean, I probably can't even name the number of interfaces I've implemented, like literally hundreds of interfaces I've implemented. When you figure out what it takes to make two disparate healthcare systems pass critical patient information between the two of them, and you know how to build all the mapping tables, and you go through all of that, you can do anything. Just saying.
I agree with that. Well, my take on imposter syndrome is people are always like, well, I'm not ready. I'm not ready to post. I'm not ready to launch the offer. I'm not ready to pitch myself for the speaking gig. I'm not ready to reach out to the reporter. And in my ever so humble opinion, you know what, screw that. I'm not trying to be humble. In my opinion, being ready is a choice. Being ready is a decision that you make. It's not a feeling. It's a decision. You decide you're ready and you take action, period. And I think that if you are so crippled with imposter syndrome, I think you have to ask yourself, is this something?
Do you want it bad enough?
Do you want it bad enough?
Yeah.
Yes. And is there validity to this? Am I an imposter? Because if the answer is yes, great. There's a wealth of knowledge and information out there. If you truly are lacking skills and lacking information and it would be unethical for you to bring on clients and provide the service, great. Go out there.
Solve that problem.
And solve that problem. That's a solvable problem. And a friend of mine in the online space, she says, when you become a founder, you become an excuse eliminator.
That is so true.
That's your only job. That's your only job, is to just solve problems. And that's my thing, is people, and I get real triggered with clients and are like, oh, it's imposter syndrome, I can't post a video. Do you have an imposter syndrome, or are you an imposter? Do you know how to do that thing? Yes or no? Yes, I know how to do it. Great. Then you're ready. Decide to film the video.
Oh, that's good advice. I mean, that breaks it down into a different way of looking at it, and gets you away from the feeling, the imposter feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's my thing that I think that you would probably agree with, is a lot of people online, and I've been getting hate on threads for saying this. Your business is its own living, breathing entity.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And
it sometimes takes on a life of its own.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And my thing is like these mindset coaches that want to peddle you hopes and dreams and, crystals up your butt to be able to scale your business. I personally find that predatory, because the thing is that, and I'm curious to hear what you think about this, but you can tell me if you're like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. But I feel like your business is separate. And to a certain degree, yes, you have to take care of yourself to be able to run your company. You have to be able to, you have to be able to perform. You have to be able to have, the ability to, you have to have a certain amount of cognitive ability to be able to run a company. But also your feelings, you have the ability as a intelligent individual to back burner your feelings and show up and do the work regardless of your mindset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thoughts?
Yeah. There's a lot packed into that. Let's unpack it.
Let's unpack that, shall we?
You know, sometimes, and I will say that I am very guilty of getting in and just doing the work and just knuckling down and just staying hyper focused on doing the job and getting the results regardless of how long it takes.
Which I don't think is a bad thing.
It's it can be it in the short term I totally agree. In the short term sometimes you just got to double down and do the work.
Yeah.
But if it's long term, then sometimes you probably can get into overwhelm, to mental health issues. You could work yourself into depression or any number of things. So when you unpack it, you do need to be mindful of how close you are to your own breaking point, and you need to do self-care. Maybe you need more sleep, maybe you need more exercise, maybe you need to eat healthier, whatever it is. Maybe you have health issues you need to take care of and not ignore. But that doesn't mean that that you can just yeah.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Well, and I think there's a difference between being on the brink of burnout, where you've pushed yourself so hard that like physically you don't have anything else to give.
Yeah.
Versus mentally you have a little bit of a block that you're allowing to keep you from doing things that physically you are more than capable of doing.
That I agree with. Yeah. There is a difference. There is a big difference. Yep.
Yeah.
And so, I think that you have to, be mindful. But nothing substitutes getting in and doing the work and just getting it done.
Agreed. How much mindset do you think goes into building a successful company?
How much mindset? I guess it depends. I always have this hope and vision of where things are going to go. And so it's sometimes surprising to me that everybody doesn't just get it and get on board with it.
I agree.
And sometimes as a leader, I think you really have to talk about the vision. You have to talk about what it's going to look like getting there. You're going to talk about what it's going to look like on the way there, because you don't build a business overnight. And sometimes there's a lot of hard work that goes into it. And sometimes you start out doing things the hard way and you learn that there's easier and better ways to do things. And I think some of that, the faster you fail, the faster you can move forward. And not being hung up because, well, this cost me too much in labor to do this project. I really didn't make any money on it. Well, yeah, you just learned a really valuable lesson. You're not going to do that again. So the next project you have like this, you're either going to know how to price it right or you're going to know how to source it right. And so I really feel like as a leader, you've got to, keep a positive outlook. You've got to, help the team really see what the vision is and work so everyone's working towards the same vision. If you have somebody who's, off in left field and not paddling in the same direction as everyone else, you're just going to go in circles and you're not going to be able to be successful.
Yeah, I agree. Well, one of the top questions I get asked like in my DMs is people are like, how do you stay so motivated? And I'm like, I'm not motivated. I'm not motivated at all. In fact, I consider myself a relatively lazy person. And I find like I'm going to find the easiest way to do something, you know? And I think that that's what like makes a lot of people like actually successful is like, I'm going to look for the easiest way to get something done. I'm looking for the path of least resistance. And sometimes the path of least resistance still has a hell of a lot of resistance. But if I know I need to get that thing done, I'm going to do it regardless. And so
I can give you a good example of that in a very practical way.
Yes.
So I had a team. I don't know, there's probably about 10 of us at one time. And we were at this one organization. It had about 1,000 computers, and we got a malware that spread throughout it came from somewhere else and it spread throughout the organization. And so like we had like 1,000 computers that everybody was calling the help desk. And what was interesting was one tech figured out how to rapidly eradicate the malware, but you had to you had to like either remote in or go touch every single computer. And then separately, I had a second employee who was perfectly willing to let those help desk calls pile up while he wrote the code to programmatically fix the problem. And so you need both kinds of techs, if you have a large operation. But one tech would just crunch and solve all 1,000 tickets one at a time.
Right.
The other employee took a half a day and didn't do any tickets.
Yeah.
But by the end of the day, he had the script written and we fixed everybody overnight. Yeah. And so, it would have taken weeks to do it manually.
Right.
And so, when you look at it that way, being lazy but having the skills to be smart and do it smarter really is the sweet spot.
Yeah. I agree completely. I think you hit the nail on the head. Well, and I think that people don't, I don't know. It seems to me, and I always try to like answer the questions that we get in DMs and comments that I see a lot. It appears to me that people are looking for the answer. The one answer, the one blueprint, the one roadmap, the one motivation hack.
The easy button.
Yeah, the easy button. And that's what people are looking for. And the thing is like, there's no mindset coach that's going to cure you not wanting this thing that you're building bad enough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's no viral content formula that's going to force someone who really doesn't care that much about marketing to show up and do it. There's no easy button. There's no one way to scale a business. And for every industry, there's going to be like, there's a million ways to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And like, even coming back to the beginning of what we said, like you can pivot, you can change, but like ultimately I think success comes from rolling with the punches.
It really does. And you have to be able to pivot in your industry. You have to be able to listen to the market.
Yeah.
I thought my product was supposed to look a certain way. And then,
we all think that at the beginning. Yeah.
We have this idea and then we find out, oh, wait a minute.
No one's going to buy that.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so you really have to listen to the customer. You really have to know what they need. And you really have to be able to respond to that. And if that means you have to rip it apart and redo it so that it's consumable, so that they can actually implement it, then you need to be flexible enough to do that. And just saying, nope, this is the way I designed it, isn't the recipe for success.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, and new founders, I have this conversation probably day in and day out, is they're like, well, I have this idea. I'm like, great, that's fine. Launch it. Why? Like, don't spend the next 5 years trying to build that idea because it's going to change. You're going to launch it. You're going to run 1 or 2 people through and you're going to see, oh, wait, they actually need this.
Yeah.
And so it's like, just put something out there. And I always say, jump off the cliff, build the plane on the way down.
I love that. It's interesting you say that because one of the things I've been concerned about with this program I've built is the law hasn't even dropped yet. So I'm building this coaching program that is a compliance requirement. And when the law drops, there could be quite a few changes I have to incorporate into the program. Mm-hmm. But that's not the biggest thing I'm concerned about. What I'm concerned about is when these assessors start doing the assessments, there's a whole lot of gray areas, and we're going to find out real fast what they set precedent on and what they rule is acceptable and not.
Yep.
And so for the next year,
it's going to be iteration after iteration.
Exactly. And things that are in the program today, they could, these assessors could come out and say, oh, we want more of this or less of that. And so the whole program is going to have to be adaptable to meet whatever these new iterations and these new precedents that they're going to be setting.
Yeah, 1,000%. Well, that's the thing. There's no perfect roadmap.
Nope.
It's just like your offer and your business is like, it's a living document. It's not finalized. It's never finalized. And like probably the first month that you launch something, you want to have that curriculum open on your screen at all times so you can go in and make little edits like nonstop. And that's just the reality. And I wish more people would talk about that. That doesn't mean that you were ill prepared. That doesn't mean that you're not a leader in your industry. It doesn't mean that you're not good at what you do. It doesn't mean you're not the best at what you do. It just means that you have to iterate as you listen to your people, as you should.
Yep, exactly. And that's the biggest thing, is really being able to listen and then pivot and adjust to what the real need is.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. I think we're good.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming.
My very first podcast.
I love it. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Social Media Millionaire podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review, preferably a positive one. If you have anything bad to say, write that in your diary. I don't want to hear about it. You can find me on Instagram at kenda.laney. Can't find you on Instagram.
I'm on there now. I'm on the real Nancy Laney.
Okay.
I think. I'm on TikTok too now.
You're on TikTok too now.
And X.
But if you guys have any questions, anything you want to chat through from this episode, feel free to DM me. Will you check your Instagram DMs?
I promise I will. As soon as you show me how. Just kidding.
Okay.
I'm kidding.
I'm done. Feel free to send us the DMs. Our DMs are always open. We're more than happy to chat with you about this. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.